Sure. I also would like to ask, related to teachers and teachers training,
Mm-hmm.
how do you see the role of teachers nowadays in this forthcoming revolution in technology and education? And how should we prepare teachers for this future?
First of all, give them the technological skills, right? I mean, uh, it's happening. I don't have numbers, but teachers are becoming old and older because of the general trends in demography in the world. And this means that after a certain age, most of them would stop playing around with technology. And what seemed to be a computer, let's say learning how to use a computer in the 90s, was a skill that survived and still survives as very, very useful until now. Right? So it's 20 years or 25 years since if you learn to work with a computer and word processors and even internet, let's say from mid-90s, right? That was a skill, those were skills that survived and were very useful until 25 years. Now what's happening is, if you think of cell phones, right? Well, learning how to SMS survived a lot less time. And this will go on happening. So the need to actually be tech savvy in the sense that you don't learn the specific skill for the specific tool, but actually you're able to adjust to the new technology and learn the new technology by yourself is something that needs to be developed into the set of teacher skills. On the other hand, I think giving them, it's not necessarily on the other hand, giving them a critical approach to the use of technology is very useful, so that they're not fascinated by the lights and the flashes and of technology, which always enchant us, right, very fast. And they have this second moment where they actually think, okay, what it is that I'm using this for? What skill is it that I'm using this technology for? What concept is this technology actually going to help develop in my students? Because if you go back to the use of PowerPoint, the origins of use of PowerPoint, you would see that, right? It was the same text that was written somewhere else, but now it had flashes and lights and animations and the use of the most strambotic fonts they could find, right? Because they found the idea that lively was more motivating. And the text was in fact the same, and actually now reading it was more confusing, right? So that's a serious risk that needs to be avoided in a way. Then I would say teachers, we have this issue. Many of our, and this is the region, many of our TVET trainers are not pedagogues. They are not trained formally in didactics or in any other theory. So they come from the world of work, right? They know their stuff, to say so. They know their business. And they know eventually one of the good things about that is they know the technology that's being used in the market, right? And they can teach it. But that's the idea they have of technology. They don't have any training to make good use of technology for actual skill development, right? So there's an issue there of professional. This is a very hard word for me in English. I don't know why. Professionalization, I think it is, of the teacher role. In the sense that, okay, yes, we need to find a balance between you working in the labor market, in the enterprises, and at the same time actually being a teacher, right? That needs to be solved. As for technology and how there's also an issue of perception, which has to do with values. for example. Some people assume that using WhatsApp in class would be disrespect for the teacher, right? Which personally I tend to feel that is the fear that the teacher has that they're actually he's not in control anymore, right? But the use of technology is sometimes in the same way that we still assume that good future workers will know how to respect a dress code, and if they don't, they're bad students. And this happens a lot, right? That we put a set of social values into assessing the skills of or the ability of the student. And with technology, it happens a bit the same. For example, this internet thing, and it happened some time ago. Well, we shouldn't, because they go into the course and then they start going into Facebook, and who knows what else they'll be watching during the course, right? So there's a lot of preconceptions regarding that need to be tackled. And you would find less of that if you get teachers from certain sectors, in the service sectors, for example, technological sectors, who knows. But you also get teachers who come from, they themselves come from very traditional backgrounds, right? And sectors of the economy. So I would say it's a bit that there's an issue of the preconceptions that need to be tackled. You need to provide them with the skills, and with the skills to use them, and then you actually need to provide them with the skills to use them meaningfully in the learning process, right? Because it's different to actually be able to handle it and then to use it for a certain specific purpose, in this case a learning purpose.
Sure. Thank you very much for this. I would like to ask a few more questions related to the inclusiveness use of technology in education. One of the issues that we have been discussing, for example, is issues related to gender, or we know that there seems to be a certain gap, technological gap between developed countries and in developing countries. And so, especially from you that has so much experience in South America and Latin America in general, could you tell us a little bit about how is nowadays in regions like Latin America, how is it possible to have access to these types of technologies in education? Is it possible nowadays? Is it still too expensive? What's your opinion on this?
Okay, it is expensive. There are places where this is way more expensive than others. I would say the quality varies a lot, depending on even in the same country, it varies a lot. Latin America went for an approach where technology and communications, in particular internet communications, was during the 90s privatized. So the stimuli for actually getting a good coverage everywhere depends on the market, right? And that's a problem. That's a central problem, because when you go to economically depressed areas, you find less incentive to actually invest. So that needs to be tackled through national policy, right? That's a serious problem. If you take the case of Costa Rica, or Uruguay, to be the case, where telecommunications were not privatized, you get much better coverage for all the population. Right, that the statistics indicate clearly there is much better coverage, broadband coverage, actually, good quality coverage. So that's an issue. That's an issue that needs to be tackled. It's really complicated. It's really complicated because once the system is set in that way, it's very hard to generate the stimuli for the private interests to move towards certain sectors. It has to be promoted from in many different ways. There are other issues regarding this this problem. There are other challenges regarding this issue. In Bolivia, for example, e-learning is not authorized for TVET. There's no possibility. You cannot, in your curriculum design, you cannot assign distance learning hours. Right? If you send your students to study a certain amount of content at home, those hours will not be counted as part of the study. So there's a whole philosophical, ideological approach there to how bad e-learning is, right? That's another issue that needs to be tackled if you want to actually give access to everybody. Because what actually happens is not equitable. I'm quite sure that lots of people in Bolivia have access to internet and e-learning courses outside the country, and to private universities who actually they have their own kind of offer. So our students, our TVET students, who in general come from the lower part of strata, are being denied access to experiment with that technology and those processes. Whereas actually the people who are in better conditions, in better economical or financial conditions, they do get access. So by way of ideological blocking something that feels not right or is assumed right, you're actually reinforcing unequitable logics, right? So that's an issue. In terms of gender, it's very diverse. It's very diverse. You can go to, if you go to some very more old-fashioned, let's say, less open societies, you would find in Central America, you would find in Bolivia, for example. What you will find is that many female students actually, it's not that they don't get to technology, they don't get to study traditional men-oriented skills. They don't develop those skills. They don't go for mechanics or engineering or what else? Let me think of other things that are traditionally man-oriented, electromechanics, metal mechanics. And it's not because they don't want to, or carpentry. To be actually, you can say carpentry. They don't get there, but it's not because they're not allowed to. And sometimes not even because the society blocks them from going there. It's not that, oh, you're going to study a manly. No, the thing is, the work environment they're going to find themselves working in is too manly after that. So it's really not motivating. Right. So this problem comes before the access to technology, right? This is, I would say, you don't find in Latin America an issue where women should not access technology. In the same way, you have other societies where you say, well, women shouldn't do this kind of thing. If we go to the limits, women shouldn't go to school. Right? So it happens in some cultures, right? Or women shouldn't drive, right? It does happen. Well, you could find somebody saying, okay, I don't think it's morally, it's a moral risk for women to access internet and blah blah, right? That's not an issue in Latin America. That's not really an issue. If you go to Brazil, if you go to Argentina, Chile, if you go, which are, I would say, culturally more open societies, it's less and less.
Interesting. So now I would like to ask a last question related to the data, education data. We know that also one of the main issues related to new technologies nowadays is how can we make a safeguard, a transparent and auditable use of data that is collected through technology. We know that this is an issue for not only for education, but for almost every different type of technologies nowadays. We see, for example, in social media, we see the issues related to Facebook, for example, in the last years. How is this? Is this an issue for education, or is this being somehow challenged in the education field? Do you see that educationists in general are worried about this other side of technology, or the use of technology?
We have in the region, I would say we have a problem, which is if we think of what the status is at the time, we have the inverse problem. We have very bad data collection. Actually, this is some of the things that we have to discuss all the time in CINTERFOR, because it's very hard for us to actually get comparative data on how TVET systems work. So I would say for the time being, it's inverted as an issue. What I would say in any case is that when you find that Google is offering educational platform for K-12, which is 12 years of study in the US, United States, they are offering these solutions where they will put all the tools they have so that you can actually move inside their environment. I would like to read, I have never done, but I would like to read the terms of service of that. That probably indicates that most of the interaction and the use of that and the analytics that come from that will be probably accessible by Google. So they want to put their hands on that, right? And I think that is going to be a trend. When you go when you get support from one of these big companies to support your learning process, you will find your data being messed up with, right? Being analyzed and used for machine learning, in this case, for artificial intelligence, right? I think that is something we should worry about. They have, and this is a very personal opinion, they have not shown really any moral restraints in that field, right? If you take a look at what happened with Facebook lately, when the US pressed, when the European Union pressed for better privacy, all non-European accounts which were located in Ireland were based legally. The legal framework was Ireland, were moved away from Ireland and moved to the US. So my account in Facebook is now not regulated anymore by the European Union law, but by the US law. So the moment they decided to comply, they made all things possible to actually maintain an edge, to keep an edge on using your data. So then again, that would be a trend. What I would like to see is eventually the use of, from what I understand, the use of blockchain as distributed databases, which blockchain is a technology, from what I understand, that does replicate information in lots of places and checks for integrity between those databases, and nobody's actually the only owner, right? There are many owners and certified owners of that data, and it's being used in banking, but it can be used for any kind of information, right? I think that's something that could be interesting to consider. Then again, there is a lot. I want to be consistent with what I've been saying. Blockchain is also a buzzword at the time, so beware. Maybe we're just being impressed by the lights, right? That's something that we need to take into account. So then again, the use of transparent information, well, that is also a risk, right? If you make what's transparent and what's not, how to make information transparent and what not, because not all information needs to be public, right? Your question did not refer to the use of being public or not. It was a transparent use of educational data. Then again, let's say Google learns anything that it's a major insight of how humans learn, right? I think that should be public. I don't think it's like if we decide that the first one that lands on the moon owns it, right? It's the same thing. It's the same logic. Since I have the resources, whatever I gain from here now, it belongs to me. And there are things that shouldn't be. Learning, for example, right? The way to make people actually develop their skills, those kind of things should not. Technology can play an excellent role in finding that, generating those insights by analyzing data, for example, and it can also play an awful role in terms of not being equitable, getting that information only for those who can pay for it, right? So yes, I wouldn't. It's again, it's not the technology, you know. I would say the problem is in this case people, or how societies are organized, or how the economy is organized. Technology, I'm quite sure we'll start making great advances in terms of what works in education and what doesn't, for certain contexts, right? But we should all be allowed to get into that.
Well, I have to say thank you very much, Rodrigo, for your insights and for your answers. For me, this was really interesting. I've learned a lot with you today. Thank you very much for this. And I'm not sure maybe if Walter or Ingling, if they have any specific questions. If not, I will thank you, Rodrigo, very much for being here today and for helping us. And if you have time, if you're able, it will be also interesting to see your commentaries also in the virtual conference so that we can continue the discussion. We're going to publish this video probably still today, and I hope that everyone can watch it. And if you're watching this and you have any further questions, please add your commentary on the virtual conference and we will try to answer it and we'll try to discuss it. Rodrigo, thank you very much.
No, thank you, Jan, and all the team, Wouter. Thanks for considering us. And I hope this kind of conversational responses I gave are actually of good use. I'll make sure I can write something on and come back to the forum. I just landed yesterday from a mission, and it was quite complicated in terms of time. But then again, thank you, and very, very happy to help.
Yes, thank you very much.